Hi, everyone, and welcome to Happy Not Satisfied, the show where we talk to people about finding joy in the process of growth. I'm Dan Morrison. I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Ellie Morrison, and we are so fortunate to have an incredible guest with us today. He is a world-renowned multidisciplinary artist whose work has been featured in Berlin and Cuba and Mexico, across the U.S. He's also founded this incredible organization called Casa Caché, which is an artist residency program that sends artists to Cuba to create incredible and inspired work. And I personally have had the pleasure of attending an event that featured our guests' art, and it was unbelievably compelling. I think Ellie would agree. We walked into the room where some of his photos were hanging, and it was just inspiring. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce and say hello to our amazing guest, Jorge Villarreal. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. I mean, seeing your art truly, like, there was a piece, I think, with this old woman smoking a cigar.
Yes.
Which, saying that, you might be like, what? I will never forget that. I was like, someday I need to buy that.
Yes, Dan was so moved by that piece. He said, I don't know why I'm drawn to this, but it's just like taking my breath away.
It was the artist.
I want to know that
behind
lady.
It. Yeah. And the artist, yeah.
Well, we're so excited to talk to you, Jorge, and learn more about your work and your process and Casa Caché, which is this great organization that, as Dan mentioned, you founded, and you yourself will be going to Havana, correct?
Correct.
Soon. But we love to dive in right away on this podcast and talk about finding joy throughout this process of growing and building throughout your career. And, you know, one of the things we always ask is something that can be tough to reconcile, right? Especially if you are an artist and a creative person, is throughout your process of, you know, growth and building to your style and building your becoming kind of a prolific artist that you have and getting all these accolades and achievements, there can be sort of a struggle in once you have put out something and it's received so well, there might be like a drop off, right? Where that joy in the moment fades away. As you have grown throughout your career, how do you work through that?
Through my career, how do I work through like the process? And I don't know. It's just every day at a time, I guess, little by little, and just no one really teaches you that process. It's kind of learning as you go, and just keeping the mindset and like the end goal of that certain series or that certain project, and maybe when you think it's finished, you realize that it's not finished, and it's something like, as a photographer, a series can last up to like 20 years to create, or like a photo book, or I don't know, just a documentary. Like it's more powerful with the span of time that you capture, I guess, through the process of first understanding what it is that you are creating. I tend to photograph or create and then digest what it is I'm creating, instead of vice versa, having the concept first. But I'm also dyslexic, so I tend to work backwards.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's part of the process that helps me work best.
Well, that's another thing that we talk about all the time, is there is no end, right? So
Correct.
When you are striving for something, a goal is not finite, right? So this reach for something, it's difficult that once you get there, once you achieve it, you have to realize, wait, this process of growth is not final right now, you know? And I love hearing that through the lens of a body of work in particular. It's that it can live on for decades, or you can be creating it for decades simultaneously.
Or it continues to evolve into something else that I've experienced through my body of work, especially through photographing walls.
Interesting.
When I first started to photograph colors and textures found in walls in Havana, I would think of them as gemstones, or like kind of like treasure hunting around the city and like little alleyways. And then after understanding what it was I'm actually like photographing and walls and what that represents to me, an artist from the border, and what borders and walls represent to people from the border. So that's how that series then became not just gemstones, but a barrier that I'm documenting, and how it speaks to us in current times, you know?
Wow, that's fascinating. So when was the first time you went to Havana?
The first time I went to Havana, I think, was in March of 2009.
Okay.
And my father and my uncle had been traveling there since the late 80s, throughout the 90s. And then finally my dad started taking me there, and he had a lot of friends and introduced me to all his friends there. And I immediately became fascinated. Actually, that photograph that you really liked with Graciela smoking the cigar, I think that photograph I took it with like a very low pixel point and shoot camera, and I was just so bothered that it wasn't more like clear, or like the resolution wasn't like National Geographic quality. And that kind of sparked the interest to start taking photography classes and investing in a higher resolution camera to take better quality photos. So when you look at that image, it's very pixelized, it's very grainy, and not, it's not a pretty photo, but
that's what makes it so amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what moves me as an artist, just kind of like finding beauty in the not so pretty. So I'm very drawn to textures. I'm very drawn to weathered materials and colors, of course.
Yeah. You know, it kind of reminds me a little bit. I'm a classical musician, and I grew up playing the trumpet. There are recordings of symphony orchestras from like the 50s that are kind of what you're talking about, where there's that little bit of grain in there. There's a little bit of something in there, but that almost makes it, I don't know if more endearing is the right term, but it draws you in a different way than the super sterile, overproduced thing that you hear on the radio. Of course. And I think that there's some similarities there, and that draws people in. And so I love that. Pardon my ignorance, but wasn't it difficult to get to Cuba until very recently? Am I crazy, or I thought it was hard to travel there?
Well, in 2009, I would travel to Havana through Mexico.
Okay.
But I always traveled with my U.S. passport. I have dual citizenship. I actually have to go get my Mexican passport after this. But I always traveled there with a U.S. passport. At the airport, you buy a visa. You check off what your reason for travel is, which is cultural research or visiting family, you know, like, I don't know, something.
Yeah.
And they receive you without any issues. There's never, personally, I've never experienced any problems traveling there.
Oh, okay.
And
I was just curious.
I've traveled there, I don't know, I'm very frequently since 2009.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Going back to something you said earlier that I found super intriguing and relatable about your process, and it sounds like you kind of just start doing things before you really know what it's going to be.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really important message, and it kind of requires like a trust that it's going to lead somewhere. And I bring that up because it's something I struggle with a little bit, is like trusting in that the universe, that things are going to work out the way they're supposed to without knowing what the end is going to be, you know? And so I'd be curious, like, have you always approached life and art that way? What inspired you to just sort of start and then see what happens, as opposed to, I'm going to take a picture of this, or this is the end goal and here's how I'm going to get there? You kind of do the reverse.
Of course. I mean, a lot of the times you produce something or you capture an image and most of the time it doesn't lead anywhere,
Yeah.
you know, but it's always good to have that one time it does,
Yeah.
you know, and if you don't keep trying to see where things go or lead, it's I mean, you lose out on a great opportunity. I started photographing close up of cars that, if you look at them, it's just it's nothing. It's just a close up detail of like a headlight or a door handle or the trunk of a car. But again, it once you start building this series, it talks about the 3 to 4 hour lines to cross the border from McAllen to Reynosa, and it's just what you're you just growing up, you stare at these like car parts, you know, like just waiting in line.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, it's always good to just capture whatever strikes your eye or attention. I'm sorry, without understanding why. Just as if you like it, just capture it or create it, and then digest why it is that you took that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Like just taking action. And I think that relates to something too that I think about a lot. And I think a lot of people do is like, you hear this thing of like finding your why and your purpose and this greater thing. And once you have that, like then everything's great and you just work towards that. But it's like, that doesn't just fall in your lap, right?
No,
and like,
no.
I think it relates to what you're saying, because I think you find that by just taking action and doing things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Whether it's photography or literally anything,
Yeah.
I think it's such an important takeaway and an inspiring one.
You take the action and the meaning arrives to you while you're
Yes.
doing the action. And I wanted to circle back to your comment about grit, because I just wrote a piece. I'm a writer also, a writer, an artist as well as everybody, but I just wrote a piece on my Substack that I was determined to take action. A perfect example. I didn't know what I was going to write about. I just was inspired to write about kitchens without upper cabinets. And then as I was writing, I realized, oh, there's a meaning here. The deeper meaning is that right now, you know, looking at Pinterest at kitchens without cabinets is making me realize that what I'm craving in this chapter of life is grit and real and authenticity. And for some reason, like the visuals of no cabinet doors and just having your art and family story and knickknacks displayed in the kitchen of all things. I feel so drawn to what you just said about, you know, finding that grit is pretty, you know, like finding the beauty in the
Absolutely.
grit. And
Yeah.
as I think I've grown in my creative process and as an artist, with my mediums, whatever they are, it's like that is what I'm drawn to. And I find it interesting that like social media has been kind of a gateway, you know, visual study for people to understand, like to spark your eye or to become inspired by something over time. But I find that my constant urge that I'm fighting against always is like, stop looking at and being influenced by what is pristine all the time on Instagram, because I feel like finding your authentic lane as a creator or creative has to do with like leaning into the mess, leaning into the grit, telling human experience and stories through, a lot of times it's duality, right? It's conflicting emotions, it's conflicting situations. And that's part of what I'm so interested in about your background and growing up on the border between Mexico and Texas, how that message is in your work and how we see it reflected in your work.
Of course. Yeah. And especially like, again, not knowing what it is you're creating at the moment until it naturally kind of, you digest it and it all clicks and it makes sense. Documenting walls documenting walls, it totally makes sense from like where I grew up and like Spanish being my first language, learning English through elementary and always like thinking back and forth in Spanish and English and getting tongue twisted and thinking in Spanish but talking in English. All of that whole like mix up things like just exists in my brain constantly.
Yeah.
So it's nice to digest it and express it through fine art.
Interesting.
And express it through something that looks as beautiful as I envision it when it's chaotic in my brain. But,
I love that.
yeah.
And speaking about Havana in particular, I mean, talk about such a rich visual presentation of like duality
Absolutely.
and like ruin, while also like the riches and the ruins all in one.
Yeah. And it's the cultural there, like it's like the religious culture is fascinating to me, and like the way Catholicism and like Afro-Cubism, like Santeria rituals and cultures and religions all mix in with music and with art and with colors. It's so fascinating and it's so rich and it's so inspiring to anyone who gets to experience it. And I mean, that's what ignited my passion for photography and art. And yeah, that's what I want to give back through Casa Caché.
Now let's talk about Casa Caché.
Okay.
Can you give us a little bit more detail about, I know it's an artist residency program. There are various levels of sponsorships that you can sponsor an artist. So is the idea that you can come from anywhere, artists can come from anywhere and stay in Havana?
Yes. Yes.
But it's an organization that is Mexican, correct?
We started the foundation in Mexico.
Okay.
It's a Mexican foundation that invites international artists to stay and work in Havana for a month. We give them studio space. We give them loft space with their own private bathroom. We give them mentorship programs, workshops, reviews, studio visits. We organize weekly cultural visits to specific, like, significant sites, like the ISA, the Instituto de Arte Superior, which is this fascinating, beautiful university of art in Havana that's not really open to a lot of people. It's it's hard to go visit there. And through our program and through my collaborator Nelson Ramirez, we were able to coordinate visits for our residents and participating artists to take them there. And we leave May 1st, and I'm so excited to host everyone there.
Oh my gosh, that's in a few days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So do you have, how many artists are going for this first round?
Our goal this is our first round. Our goal was to take 5, and we were able to select 3. But one of the selected artists is coming with her husband from Germany, who was also a finalist.
So you kind of have 2 in 1 there.
Kind of, yeah. We got lucky, and then right now we're experiencing some difficulties through current turmoil with one of our selected resident artist from Iran, who is having issues getting his visa. So we're trying to organize a way where he can participate and benefit from being selected through online presentations and reviews and talks and introductions with the artists and curators that we wanted to introduce the selected artist in Havana.
Wow. And where are the remaining 2 artists from?
Remaining
one.
Oh, Karina, she's from Germany, and then from Frankfurt, and then Cecilia Villaverde from Mexico.
Okay, wow. So it truly is an
From
international.
Mexico and San Antonio.
Oh.
Yeah.
What an amazing program that you've started.
Thank you.
Now this is your idea, obviously. You're the founder.
Yeah. We were set to launch it in 2019.
Oh.
And it's been up and coming for a minute, and then the pandemic started, and everything got kind of paused and set on hold for 2.5 years. So as soon as we were all able to travel again, I took off like immediately over there and resecured, like make sure the house was still like a go.
Mm-hmm.
Our collaborator Nelson Ramirez was still interested in collaborating with us. He's the director of the Havana Biennial, and he's the director of the Contemporary Art Museum in Havana as well, and the curator for the Cuba Pavilion in the Venice Biennale. So he's very world renowned as well, and very well connected in Havana, and we're honored that he wants to work with us.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be, I have a feeling it's going to be huge. It's going to grow and grow and grow. And personally, I just have to shout out the branding of it. I am obsessed with the pink and the red. I mean, the way that it all comes together, and the way that you're presenting it all in the Instagram feed, it really captures me. And
thank you.
It makes me want to jump on a plane and go down there.
Well, y'all should.
My grandparents loved going to Cuba. That was like where from here, they would go all the time because it's close.
Yeah, it's like a 2-hour flight. 2.5 hour flight.
Well, one day we'll get there. It's on our bucket list.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to pivot a little bit and just talk more about kind of your mindset as an artist. I come from a very artistic, creative, musical, theatrical family. And so I myself, and I have seen my family members kind of face lots of rejection, right? Like if you're making a career as an artist and you're really going to do it, that goes hand in hand with rejection. We had a guest on previously who said rejection just becomes your friend, which I thought was a really good way of putting that. I would be curious, not to assume anything about you, but if you've faced that rejection in your career while trying to build a life as a professional artist, kind of what that felt like, how you overcame it, how you continue to push through and find the success that you have currently.
Absolutely. Yeah. Rejection is it's on a daily basis.
Yeah.
We were actually like rejected 3 times, like trying to create the foundation in Mexico. It was very difficult to make all that work. And as like any little issue we had or anything that we could to improve our application process or paperwork for the foundation, we just kept applying, and finally, like after the 3rd time, it took like almost 2 years to get that permission and create the foundation. But also as an artist, applying to open calls and for exhibitions or to be part of like certain biennials or certain festivals, art fairs. There's so many people, that have, and it's not that it's not because you're not good, or it's not because your art is not great. It's just there's so many people with so many opinions, and maybe you just didn't cut it that time, and it's so normal to just keep trying. Like the Berlin residency, I mean, it's something that you apply to, I don't know, like 8 years in a row every year until every year they have different curators selecting the artists. So
I see.
One
So
year,
it's starting over every time, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And your work is just strengthening, and like the way you apply or present your applications or your proposals, just keep improving the more you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I don't know, it kind of just works out better, you know. It's, for me personally, you look back and you're like, oh man, imagine if I would have gotten that show 4 years ago. Like, I would have looked horrible. Like my, like I'm actually,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And my work's just that much more powerful, you know, and that much more like the way I present my work, or the way I print my work, or the way I talk about my series. Just I'm better. I'm ready. What's the word when you're
More equipped?
Yeah,
Yes.
you're better equipped,
Yeah.
or better
Prepared.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good.
Again.
It's no problem.
That's an interesting thing to think about, though, that the rejection makes you more powerful, because the more you get hit, you know, that you get down
Building
and then
up your armor.
You're building up your armor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
the Chumbawamba song.
Yeah, I get knocked down.
I
Yeah,
love it.
exactly.
Hey, fun fact about that song. It's actually, so I said I play trumpet. There's a piece called Trumpet Voluntary. You would recognize it. It's like played at weddings and stuff. The whole song, the form of the song is based on that piece of classical trumpet music.
Really?
It comes, so you know, it comes on at the end actually. The trumpet plays
Yes,
and you
yes.
hear it. That is what the whole song is following that pattern. So next time you listen to it, I get
That's
knocked down, I get
hilarious.
back up again. It's Trumpet Voluntary. Check it out. Check it out. It's a fun fact for you.
Amazing.
So I'm curious, because it sounds like you are very resilient and you have a good relationship with understanding what no means and how really in the end that might be better. Is that something that you feel like you just have always innately had, or did you struggle more earlier in your career with it? Have you found a way to build that resiliency?
To be honest, I mean, one thing that artists from San Antonio, I think, benefit from is the community here.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone here in the art community is so helpful, so open, and so willing to like assist in any, like, a little thing here, a little thing there, or critique here, or critique there, to us as San Antonio artists evolve together, you know, and become resilient together. It's something that I've experienced as an artist here for the last 18 years. And I think being from San Antonio, or being a San Antonio based artist, has definitely empowered me in that way.
That's amazing.
Because of the community.
Yeah, I was going
I
to say the
love that.
power of having a
Yeah.
community around you is
Yeah.
pretty huge. Did you seek that out, or did you fall into it? Or, I mean,
The more, like, when I first started going to like art openings and like at Blue Star and or the Contemporary at Blue Star, I was trying to go to an art opening or an art event almost every day, or like as many as I could in one night, and just start to meet the artists and meet curators and become friends and party with everyone afterwards. It's
hard work, but someone's got to do it.
Exactly. No, but I mean, just becoming like friends with everyone early on has really, really helped me. And it's I see how many people like helped me career wise, and that's something that I try to give back as well.
Well, and I'm glad you say that, because that seems like that's what Casa Caché is becoming, is kind of your way to
Absolutely.
do that, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. And then one other point quickly, we like to talk to people about times they've created their own luck. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're talking about when you first got here, because you were seeking out the art shows and the opportunities and the relationships and all those things. And I'm sure because of that, not from one specific action, but just, again, doing the actions over and over again, I'm sure yielded relationships that have helped you in your career. And I guess I'd be curious beyond that, if there's any other time where you felt like you kind of created your own luck. Like, to me, I see you and I'm like, this is this amazing artist. And, you know, maybe he was an overnight success. I know that's not the case, right? But just someone who doesn't know, they might think that. So what are the things you did to make you look like a quote unquote overnight success? You know what I mean? Like, how do you feel like you've created your own luck in your career?
I remember my first opening. I made up a fake gallery, and it was actually my apartment.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
I love that.
I had just moved to Southtown, and it was like during First Friday, and I turned my apartment into a gallery, and I called it Lay Studios because it was on Lay Street, and a lot of people like that were walking around for First Friday, they're like, wow, like, is this a new gallery? Like, who owns it? And like, I wasn't prepared to someone ask me who owns this gallery. I was just like, oh, I don't know. I was just asked to show here. But it was all made up. And because I mean, I wanted to show my work, but I obviously didn't have any like history of showing work anywhere or a big presence in San Antonio at the time. So I just created my own space and invited people.
I'm so glad I asked you that. That is
so
the definition of creating your own life.
Yeah,
I mean,
but it takes that kind of pluck.
Yes,
like it takes,
you have to.
Yes, and creating your own show, literally.
Yes.
I read. I love Carol Burnett because I was acted growing up, was on stage a lot, and she is an icon whose biography I read, and she talked about like. In the beginning, when she first moved to New York, when she was 19, 20 years old, she could not get an agent. In order to get into a show, you had to have an agent. And so then other famous actor that she bumped into at the stage door of his Broadway show said, well, why don't you just create your own show and invite all the agents? So she did. Like she and all the aspiring actresses lived in like a boarding house, and they put on a review and sent penny postcards to all the agents, and they all came and they all got agents.
Yeah,
it's like sometimes when you're up and coming, you have to have that sort of like that entrepreneurial spirit and that grit and that really wild belief in what you're doing,
of course,
and just go for it.
Yeah. And again, like with Casa Caché, like I am the founder of the artist residency, but I'm still using it as an avenue to network as an artist, right. Meeting curators, meeting other artists, and for future like projects, for my personal work as well. But it's not just me. Like right. I'm bringing other people with me as well, and creating these inter-exchange cultural bridges. That for art.
Well, we were just at dinner the other night.
You were going to say it?
Yeah. We were at dinner the other night with friends, a couple, and we were talking about this exact thing of when you are being strategic, about how to create your own opportunities, how to leverage relationships, how to put people in your sort of personal cabinet that can help with that. It doesn't have to be anything but organic and genuine.
Of course.
And that's how you create your community. That's how you create your own opportunities, especially as independent, entrepreneurs and creatives who are trying to do something on your own, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have to kind of be thinking in that headspace a lot while you're also thinking in your very creative, like ultra, how am I going to finish this piece headspace? But there's a part of like, how am I going to get this piece seen, right? Like,
of course.
How am I going to create opportunities for others to join me at this table? And I find like, that's a really exciting place to be at now at this point in the career is how do I use these opportunities to lift others up and create these spaces for others. But at the same time, I think it's a really fun and exciting challenge to like push yourself into new circles and new cities and create genuine relationships with people who are like-minded and other artists. That's kind of what we had the conversation about the other night. And we're telepathically
yeah. Well, I think people look at networking as a dirty word, and maybe it can be if you're doing it in a way that's disingenuous.
Yeah,
of course.
But what you're talking about is cultivating genuine relationships and being interested in other people and wanting to help others while also being aware of opportunities that could present themselves within these relationships. And,
absolutely.
I think that that's the only way to not only grow yourself, but you're also growing other people. And so I I have known people that are just like, oh, networking, I don't want to do that. And it's like, we'll call it something else then, we call it relationship building with added bonuses of potential future opportunities.
Yeah.
Rolls off the tongue.
Well, and also, like, I'm from here, right? And I'm from San Antonio. I think one of the things that I took for granted before I moved to other cities was how community-oriented San Antonio is.
Absolutely.
And how friendly people are and how willing to help they are, and everybody loves to see a person trying to make their mark, right? Trying to make their idea happen, make their way. I find that like one of the best things about San Antonio is that spirit that's very generous in helping people make their dreams happen.
And I think you kind of like pinpoint yourself when you're not genuine or part of the helpful community that exists here in San Antonio. You might highlight yourself in a negative way because you're like, oh wait, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you?
It's obvious quickly, right?
Yeah.
When the intentions aren't there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is.
Without naming names, right? I can see your wheels turning.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's so funny. I'm curious, like, I think sometimes people assume like you're an artist and you just like have an artist's blood and you were just born this way and whatever. And I always argue that everybody is creative and has creativity in them, and they just maybe don't understand that what they're doing already is creative, or they haven't given themselves the opportunity to figure that out. But did you always, your whole life, think I'm going to be an artist, I'm going to be a photographer? Did you have other thoughts? Did you fall into this? Did you develop into it? Like, what did that look like for you?
I mean, when I was young, I remember always like being fascinated with photography and disposable cameras and Polaroids, and I love to always be taking photos, but I never really thought much of more than just photos, like of friends or family or dogs,
Yeah.
So that photography kind of like tick was always like in me, but I moved to San Antonio to study architecture, and I was always fascinated with architecture and design, and then I went to Cuba, and that's what sparked like the whole like that. It just kind of like spun me around a little bit, and it fascinated me. And that's when I became more interested in photography. And then for a moment, I was an architectural photographer, and I was very interested, and I still am. I love architectural photography. But that was kind of like the avenue that transitioned me from architecture to photographer to fine art.
I love that, because this is a term I just was thinking about, like this linear path fallacy.
Yes.
I think people look at you or at whoever, and it's like they must have done this and then this and then this, and they took pictures and then they did this, and then they grew their photography career but for you, it was, you thought pictures were cool, you did architecture, you did some architectural photography, you took a picture of a woman with a cigar and everything in between, you know what I mean? And so it's not just up and to the right. I was just talking to a new great friend yesterday about this. Like, it's so easy to assume that other people's path was just up and to the right, linear path to where they are. Yeah. And I don't know if I've talked to a single successful person who that is true of.
Yeah.
It's up and down and left and right and backwards and all around in a circle, and then somehow you got to where you are, and in 10 years, who knows where that's going to be.
Yeah, and I think career-wise, it's very helpful for me was also like working as like an assistant for another artist. Anson Seal, I worked for him, or still work for him from time to time, and also like art handling with like different galleries and museums around the city, and you kind of like getting to know like the back end of how things like work, or how things are developed or produced or hung or lit, or shipped,
being around it in any way you can to
absolutely
just learn.
I think that's extremely helpful.
Well, and that's something that I don't often hear or think about with visual art. is the production side of it.
Yeah.
Of course, with performing art, production, right? But then thinking through what you just said about who's framing your pieces, who's lighting your pieces, who's hanging your pieces, where are you showing them?
Exactly.
Environment, like that is fascinating to think about.
Yeah.
Because it must play a very important role in the curation when you're putting things up to show or sell, and people's interpretations and connections with your pieces.
Yeah. I mean, some people, like when you look at fine art, you're like, oh, wow, that's a lot of money. But it actually costs a lot of money to produce it in certain ways and to store it and to transport it and yada, 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 yada. I mean, it has a lot to do with it, for sure.
In a funny way, it reminds me of the moving the instruments from one place to another.
Yeah. I was the band director at Reagan High School for 11 years.
Oh, wow.
My dad was a band director, and it's family business, and it's these huge productions, and we go to these big competitions, and you're transporting like equipment that's not really meant to be transported potentially across the country. So, keeping that stuff safe and not damaged like you're talking about. Yeah, that's an interesting parallel.
But the behind the scenes of
the behind the scenes of everything that people don't think about. Yeah, for sure.
And it is the most important, in some ways, part of art.
Without it, you
wouldn't have it.
Right? Yeah,
of course.
100%. Well, I know that you have to run to get your Mexican passport, but this,
thank you.
Yeah. No, this has been such an incredible and inspiring conversation. I know you have Casa Caché coming up, and congrats again. And I hope it goes incredibly well. Is there anything else down the line that people can check out or find you on the internet or social media, or where can we see your stuff?
Absolutely. Well, so Casa Caché will run through the month of May in Havana, Cuba. And then we're going to have another open call opportunity for San Antonio artists, international artists, everyone from anywhere can apply. And that will be in September to stay for another month in November in Havana,
wow.
which would be during the Havana Biennial.
Wow.
And you could keep updated on that through our website, which is casacache.com, or our Instagram handle, casa_caché.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything for your personal stuff where we can see that?
Yes. My website is Jorge, Jorge -Villarreal with 2 L's and 2 R's.com. And that's where you could keep up to date with my stuff right now.
Yeah. Okay, great. And we'll post clips from this and tag you and all that on our account at happy.notsatisfied. But truly a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
When we saw your work, we were so inspired.
Moved.
And like we were saying before we started, that event was just absolutely stellar. So
it was really fun.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing more of your work and hopefully attending more events and getting to know you even better. And it's been great talking to you, and
wishing
we wish
you the best in Havana.
All the best. Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope Cuba's amazing and that the event goes well.
Y'all should definitely try to make it out sometime for a quick weekend.
Yeah. We
really
will take you up on that for sure.
You guys would love it.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you.
Likewise. Yeah. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.